Good afternoon, everybody over there on the East Coast. And today's another Nacho Tuesday. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce you guys to Ken and Drew over at Ancient Technologies. Please introduce your company and what you guys do at the company.
Good deal. You may go ahead and go, Drew.
Go ahead, Ken. Yeah.
All right. Appreciate it, Andy. Ancient Technologies, most people know us for it as being a nearshore staffing company, but what a lot of folks don't know is really how deep we go. We tend to build and operate high performance engineering teams that turn data into high performing production systems. And again, we do that through end-to-end interactions with engineering, data, cloud, and AI. Two flexible models we have. One is that capacity function, focused more on staff augmentation with AI-enabled senior engineers, all the way through that traditional project work where we have co-ownership in that outcome. So we're excited to be here and dive a little bit deeper. Anything you want to add there, Drew?
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Ken. I mean, I think the core idea is our ability to take critical initiatives that a lot of companies have from an idea perspective or idea phase, actually in getting that into production and making them actually work. Right, that's AI assisted and enabled and much more efficient. So we've been working with the LATAM cohort for the last several years, and we've been really impressed with what they've been able to do and how they've been able to assist U.S. companies. So it's really great.
Great. Yeah. Tell me more about your guys' background. What led you to joining with Ancient Technologies? Give us a little taste of your career and what you've done in the past.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So yeah, just by way of background for me, I'm a career security guy, career data guy. I spent the first half of my career in government, and then the second half I was in the private sector, where I was a chief security officer at three big companies: Honeywell, SpaceX, and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And so my entire career was really at the intersection of data, infrastructure, and distributed systems, with a really strong focus on data security, trust, immutability. I first got into blockchain 11 years ago at CME Group, and figuring out how to control data as a function of market data systems. And then I had the idea for a data security startup, which is ultimately how I got to know these Latin American developers. We had an idea that we brought to fruition that was recently acquired, and the teams that helped us do that, I was really impressed with from a talent perspective, and that's really what got me excited and passionate about what we're doing at Ancient. Ken, how about you?
Yeah, my story isn't quite as cool as Drew's. So I left the Army in '92 and went to University of Cincinnati for 3 weeks. And there was a gentleman that was my academic advisor that went to the same high school that I did. And he said, "What are you doing here?" Because I was going for a degree in computer science, because that was the thing you did. He said, "You have the personality for sales." So I dropped out of school. Here I am now. I enjoy having, sales isn't hard for me. Customer success is not hard for me. I just like having the conversations, and those conversations have primarily spanned IT and marketing, over the last almost 30 years. So, like Drew, I was actually introduced to Ancient through a friend, and got to know Emmy a little bit. And then by getting to know our CEO in Mexico, I got to connect with Drew, and kind of here we are today. We just have a great team that does great work. And it's just rare that you find synergies where everybody just kind of comes together and really enjoys everything from beginning to end.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've done a lot of work with Ancient over the last year and a half, 2 years. Love working with you guys. I could attest to that as well as a partner. Really easy to work with. Always there to always delivers too. So, speaking of delivery, I mean, you guys do a lot of AI projects these days, correct? What are you seeing with AI development today, and why do a lot of these initiatives fail that a lot of companies undertake? I feel like a lot of companies just want to throw some AI on it just for the sake of it. But I guess why do a lot of these projects fail?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andy. I mean, it's something we're seeing all the time, and in many cases, it's almost like they fail before they even get into the LLM modeling or the code writing. mainly because, I guess this comes from my data background, that many companies are looking at bad or inconsistent data across systems, which then leads to fragmented architecture where there isn't a single source of truth. And so that lack of data architecture and data foundations lead to, bad processes, bad code, latency issues. The quality of the code often suffers. The documentation isn't there. So, the idea phase of getting something to fruition, being able to show a demo is really, a lot of times what we see for most startup companies that are trying to prove themselves. But really where we specialize is in that next phase where you're actually looking to take that idea from a demo to production environment. And that's where applying AI from a surgical perspective is much more important than just throwing an idea in and actually starting to vibe code, opposed to actually getting something into production. So that's where really our bread and butter is. I think that's where the future of AI and development are going to be, at least for the next couple of years. And that's really what we're about in terms of making businesses successful and revenue positive. I don't know, Ken, if you have anything to add to that.
I think the only thing I want to add is AI typically will it'll amplify your inputs and really produce a broken output. It's just if it's not right on the front end, AI is not going to make it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you see a lot of people using like a kind of an LLM wrapper, or do you see many people interested in developing their own models and custom built AI tools?
I think it's all over the place. It's both it's depending on what a company or founders are looking to do. The wrappers are definitely popular, as is just looking at using Claude and building agents, right, and having agents do X, Y, and Z. Like any business, though, the question is how is that ultimately going to lead to revenue generation and the ability to actually have a business be successful, and being able to replicate and scale. You have to do that with insight and understanding from a team that knows how to actually execute, as opposed to just having one person iterate with an LLM and hope something works, right? So we really pride ourselves on taking Latin American AI expertise and embedding it into a team at a fraction of it, while still keeping them in the same time zone, as opposed to the offshoring.
Yep, that's a great point. So I guess, data is the foundation for all this to be really effective. What are some early warning signs that you see that could let a company know that they're maybe not ready for developing AI tools based on improper data management or anything like that?
That's a great question, Andy. The speed in which they make decisions, like everything slows down, it seems like, when somebody starts talking about AI, and really when it comes to another big thing is their lack of trust in reporting. I'd say those are two really big warning signs. When you've got multiple versions of the truth, we all talk about, a lot of times, like Salesforce or CRM is a single source of truth. When you have multiple data sources, it tends to create a lot of confusion in who owns the data. It certainly, degrades everything quickly, and there's just a really long time sometimes between everything being created and it being, something usable. So those are typically, some of the warning signs that we see, that I see and I hear about, when I get involved. Is there anything you want to add there, Drew?
No, yeah, I think that's right. I think that just also making sure you have data provenance, data ownership. The models can degrade quickly if you don't have provenance of the data, and that lag between that usability component is huge, right? In terms of being able to trust the outputs that the LLM is giving you. It's one of that classic bad data in, bad data out problems that is really key to understanding how to fix and maintain.
So what would you say AI ready data looks like in practice, not just in theory?
Yeah, so it's part of it is like the fundamentals, right, of going from unstructured to structured data models, looking at the real time component of your data pipelines, to the extent that they are real time, how that data is being updated, the lineage and ownership of that data, how that data is being, licensed, the taxonomy schemas, right? How the APIs are, accessing the data, as opposed to just locking them into silos or replicating that data across data lakes. So the versioning of those data sets and the updating of those data sets so that the models can actually update and work at the latest and greatest insertion levels is super important from a quality perspective. And then we're also trying to minimize the manual intervention that's required to understand and QA, quality assurance check those data models. So you're either running historical data or you're running the latest and greatest data sets based on a specific outcome. But having that data engineering component, it's interesting. I think in today's day and age, the traditional of all the development expertise that exists, the ones that seem to be coming back to and again are ultimately the data engineers, which have this weird dichotomy of like in the past, like, do we really need a data engineer? And anytime you're doing any sort of work that is data intensive with an LLM, that data engineering component is critical, and that's something that at Ancient we specialize in and provide a lot of expertise in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So what are the non-negotiables, I guess, for the modern data architecture that other companies should consider?
Yeah, so how you look to manage a data architecture that is both storage and compute ready, where you've got a centralized data layer that's flexible, that's got strong governance and strong access control, that you've got end-to-end observability around all the key points of that data ingestion to the data outputs, which then lead to how good your data versioning and how good it is to be able to replicate that over time. Those things are really non-negotiable when it comes to the the level of a fault tolerance based on what you're trying to do, especially if your application or the software is has a very low fault tolerance, right? So that is super important, and the testing component of that is important, as well as the ability for the LLMs to make sure that you have a consistent, replicable, non-hallucinating output that leads to ultimately an API first design that companies can use in a programmatic way over and over and over again.
What would you say causes a lot of the hallucinations with these platforms?
Yeah, I mean, it varies, right, depending on what model is being run, and how MCP is being or RAG is being used, as well as the data itself, right? So the other piece of this is the agent component and how agents are being deployed against very specific workflows. So hallucinations is going to be, I think, a continual problem up until you're able to validate and show work relative to the output that the LLM is given in terms of being able to justify and explain that conclusion, right? So the whole show your work component is still very important. And the question then is, how do you get that to scale without having to do that on a manual basis is one key that we've been looking at from a production perspective that has been super important.
Yep. What considerations should a company have for creating a unified system that could work with this AI platform as opposed to managing it from a siloed function? I feel like there could be potentially a lot of security issues when you're connecting across the organization, across multiple data silos. What's the best way that companies can go about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think again, it's just doing the basic security hygiene stuff, right? Good data storage, good data governance, good data access control, data, who has understanding of what that permission layer looks like. The storage component defines how that data is structured, who ultimately gets to use it. The governance defines, how confident you're able to use that data. So it's that piece of it, I think, still continues to hold. I think it's just gotten a lot more important over time. So one of the shared components of this is the ability to have this dichotomy that exists between centralization of data and then decentralized access as data becomes much more dispersed and people can access it more quickly, which leads to duplication errors, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no like silver bullet on this. So I would just go back to the fundamentals of things that I've been brought up in over the last 25, 30 years that still apply. They're just applied in a different way.
Got it. What do you think about all these companies just implementing agentic workflows and agentic AI tools? Do you see some potential problems with that? A lot of these companies are just too eager to jump into artificial intelligence, from what I understand and what I see across a lot of companies. Actually, do you see any concerns with that?
Yeah, buyers today they're chasing shiny tools. It's what's new. Who's saying I switched from this to that instead of fixing fundamentals. They tend to overcomplicate things. There's too many vendors. There's not enough integration. There's a significant underinvestment in that data quality and ownership piece that Drew's been talking about. So there's no one quick fix here. You know, when you fix the foundation and you put the right tools with a foundation that you fixed, things are going to run a lot more smoothly. People are going to be a lot happier. There's going to be a greater level of reliability, and it just creates a more powerful environment to get done what everybody wants to get done.
Yep. And when would a company know whether it's time to either build or rent the agentic tools? So a lot of companies might be on the cusp of, do we just use somebody else's, or do we start to think about building our own tool internally here? What kind of considerations would a company have there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all dependent on the risk profile of a specific company, right? I mean, it's always better to build your own and know that you've got your own quality built into what you've done. But it's also just as easy to potentially rent or look at using somebody else's LLM or model based on a specific use case, right? So I think it's highly customized around a specific use case and a specific business line. So there's no one size fits all approach. It really depends on, for example, right, depending on the criticality of what you're doing in healthcare, that varies dramatically over what you're doing potentially in a standard B2C marketing environment, where the criticality of a looking at a radiology report and duplicating that versus duplicating something at scale where there's less consequence. It's all part of that risk profile that one has to manage as a business. And I don't think there's a specific surefire answer on that. I think it's a case by case.
Yep, makes sense. Ken, where do most organizations either overcomplicate or underinvest in their data structure?
I think we kind of hit that a little bit before. They tend to focus on the shiny objects and what's the latest and greatest bleeding edge new stuff that's out there, instead of fixing the fundamentals. Trying to rely on too many vendors and too many different philosophies.
Yep. Yeah, makes a lot of sense, I guess. So why do so many AI projects succeed in demos but fail when they're actually deployed and in the field?
Yeah, so I mean, demos are always great because you're dealing with a very constrained and pre-programmed, playground area, right? Where you've got very clean, curated, static data sets with known problem, known solution. You're just trying to prove a point. Real workflows in the real world tend to be very messy. The data tends to be incomplete. The data is constantly changing, right? So, getting just like in the traditional sense of going from something in a demo or a POC environment and actually putting something into production that considers, edge cases, or considers, the opportunity for manual intervention or integration with other systems or data drift or feature requests, right? Those things are really hard to predict, and you never really know what you're going to get once you actually put something into production. And that's where where iteration becomes super important outside of a demo. I mean, demo is critical to get you to step one, but step two and step three, with respect to making sure you have something that's defensible and usable to generate revenue and not let down your customers, is super important. It's hard to predict.
And any other tips for how to bridge from the experimental stage to a production ready system?
Yeah, I think making sure you identify the very specific use case that you're going for, that is very, very tailored and curated to your highest impact, your highest value output, will lead you to a better production ready and production grade implementation down the line, right? So again, that sounds pretty basic, but that is also, when you think about old school, like looking at a software system as opposed to just like running a random experiment with some vibe code, you've got to be able to provide some level of discipline and some of that old school tooling to be able to do something that's in a serious way. Would be my thought.
Got it. I guess, Ken, this one's for you. What are some of the hidden costs of poor data foundations, both in engineering efficiency and compliance risk?
I think the simplest way I could put that is there's way too much time being spent on fixing things than innovating. Innovation is really where AI, wants to excel. But again, kind of getting back to the foundational piece, if there's too much time fixing, there's not enough time innovating, and it just slows everything down. So when the data can't be trusted, every time you release something, it just requires further validation and further back and forth, and it just has a tremendous impact on the timeline.
Drew, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I think they're making sure you've got compliance, looking at things that other requirements that might exist, like compliance exposure, things that you may not have considered is also something that, while it may slow things down, there's just some things that you have to be able to make sure you are very, very meticulous about. And because those things will potentially create vulnerabilities and gaps in your process or your outputs.
Yep. I guess, what should companies expect when they choose to work with a nearshore team?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, I mean, the great value of nearshoring is you're getting an embedded team in the same time zone that's able to run with your existing team, with the existing sprint cycles that you are on, the existing time zone.
Mm-hmm.
The cultural adaptation, right, is key, right? So a lot of the U.S. teams, when you think about how Latin America is set up culturally, have a much easier time adapting to, English-speaking Latin American developers, which has been, not always, but tends to have been problems with other offshoring providers from other countries. And at the end of the day, these, I think it's often underestimated how really, really good and professional and talented these developers are. Especially in some of the countries, there are specific areas of specific countries that specialize in specific use cases and specific verticals that are really impressive and would rival any major U.S. team. And they're obviously doing it at a much steeper discount, and usually with higher output and higher quality.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, when you've got a nearshore model, especially one like ours, it's the difference between working with a team that feels external versus a team that's actually part of your core team. And if everybody feels like they're part of the same team and moving in the same direction, you just have a much better outcome. There's a lot less finger pointing, especially when you're presenting that model as being a cohesive embedded team versus an external team.
Drew, would you be able to put together a step-by-step sequence for how a company could operationalize AI across the organization? Like where would be the starting point and what's the end goal typically?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as any company looks to leverage, AI as a software function, right? That the question, you start with the problem solution and the value proposition and then the data, right? So what is your software looking to achieve? What data do you have to leverage? What are your outputs? And then how does, a data engineer or an AI developer look to model those in a consistent way? So there's, it really depends on that first, review of requirements that a company would have that we typically will intake and say, okay, what is the exact solution that you're trying to remedy? How, the LLM may not be the end goal itself. That may not be the tooling as much as the tooling allowing these engineers to do their jobs better in such a way that is much more efficient, right? So it's not always about just like, hey, let's go to an LLM and provide the solution, as much as how can our developers actually make sure that everyone's on the same page while using the same tooling to drive better outcomes that are more consistent and replicable.
Yep. Ken, you got anything to add to that?
No, well said.
Great. I guess, so what's next for Ancient Technologies? Any exciting projects you guys are working on that you could share, of course, and anything else that you got coming down the pipeline in the next couple of years?
Yeah, no, I think at a high level, we are really focused for the next 5 years to build, the best nearshoring engineering platform that for data and AI systems that we can, right? That is fully integrated, that is AI enabled, outcome driven, right? If you're a developer and you're not using an LLM, like that, that you're not going to be a developer for very long. And we're most optimistic and positive about the fintech and healthcare space. Those spaces have always been where software has been the most complex and the stakes are always the highest. That is a natural place for us to be. And with what we're doing with AI, we're even just seeing those dividends pay even more, right? So if you're not in fintech or healthcare and you have something that can be done, chances are we can easily do that as well. But fintech and healthcare tend to be our sweet spot where we can blend the architecture, execution, and talent together to get really good outcomes for companies.
Yeah, I guess what kind of companies would be a good fit for you guys then today? You said healthcare companies are a good one, fintechs. Anything else that, for a company listening today should scream that I need to call these guys right now?
Yeah, anybody that's looking for a partner and not a vendor, that's willing to roll up their sleeves and understand what you're trying to do. We don't want to try to force a solution on somebody because, again, something off the shelf isn't going to work. And that's why we're seeing such a huge push towards some more customized solutions. So whether you're enterprise or mid-market, whether you're in fintech or healthcare, if you have a desire to better understand and solidify your foundation and put AI into practice, we should be on your radar to take a look at.
Great. Drew, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think Ken nailed it, right? I mean, I think we're really happy to be here. We've been doing this a long time. Ancient's a 9-year-old company, and we have a proven track record, and it's we love helping companies get more efficient and better and with better outcomes. It's driving stuff at a lower cost, and yeah, we'd love to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Likewise. And where can people learn more about Ancient Technologies?
You can go to ancient.global, or you can also look up, Drew or myself on LinkedIn. Very easy to find. We'd love to connect with you and discuss potential.
Great. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on today, and looking forward to the next event series that we do. Yeah, definitely love working with your companies. So I could attest to, these guys being very professional, great to work with. So highly recommend them for any software development needs that you might have.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.